Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, two major bills have been introduced in the 2021 Congress to correct what everyone knows is a dysfunctional cattle and beef market. A market that since 2015 has caused consumers to pay super-inflated prices for beef, while America's cattle producers receive severely depressed prices for their cattle. The two bills, Senate Bill 949 that requires packers to compete for 50% of their cattle, and Senate Bill 2716 that reinstates mandatory country of origin labeling, or MCOOL, for beef, are just sitting there in Congress without the needed champions to herd them to enactment. So why is that? Well, Congress likes to rely on experts, and it is determined that certain agricultural economists are authoritative on all things agriculturally related. In other words, Congress assigns considerable weight to the expert opinions of certain economists. In fact, Congress asked certain agricultural economists to make recommendations for addressing the ills of the cattle and beef market. And their experts came back with the same advice they've been giving Congress for decades. That advice was to not do much of anything to interfere with the cattle and beef markets, because according to the economists, they're functioning pretty much the way they're supposed to. Of course, I'm speaking of the now infamous report issued by Texas A&M in October that included several chapters written by these expert economists. In short, these economists told Congress the sky would fall if Congress meddled with the cattle and beef markets by mandating country of origin labeling for beef or forcing the packers to begin competing for cattle. They warned Congress that such meddling will likely cost cattle producers billions of dollars. And this is the very same message these economists have been delivering to Congress for at least the past 20 years. And that means that these economists have helped shape the cattle and beef markets into what they are today, fundamentally and systemically broken. So we should ask how reliable these economists' predictions have been during the past 20 years. Well, recall that they weighed in against mandatory country of origin labeling for beef when it was first implemented. They told Congress that MCOOL was essentially without any redeeming value and would cost cattle producers billions of dollars. But during the period when MCOOL for beef was in place, cattle producers received what were the highest nominal prices in history for their cattle, and rural communities across America reveled in the newfound economic activity resulting from those higher cattle prices. And then history shows that the end of these good times coincided with the repeal of mandatory country of origin labeling for beef. So clearly the economists Congress relied on were wrong. And then in early 2015, some of these same economists gave Congress another prediction. They cited the economic law of supply and demand to predict that the favorable cattle prices enjoyed in 2014 would be repeated in 2015 and would then remain strong for a couple of years. In fact, one of the experts predicted calf prices would increase from 2015 to 2016 and could be as high as $280 per hundredweight in 2016. Well, that economist was wrong, dead wrong, as the average calf price in 2016 was about $113 per hundredweight less than the economics prediction. So how could an expert on the fundamental law of supply and demand be so wrong about where cattle prices should be given known supply and demand factors? And since they got it all wrong then, why isn't it highly likely they're wrong now? Well, there's a handful of economists that have helped us understand what's afoot. One said it's because the assumptions underlying the predictions are false. For example, if an economist assumed that alternative marketing arrangements were the only means of providing quality incentives for cattle, that would certainly be a false assumption, as there are quality-related premiums and discount incentives built into the negotiated grid market, which is not an alternative marketing arrangement. This economist believes that this was precisely the false assumption that fueled the rise of all these alternative marketing arrangements in the mid-2000s. Another of the handful of critical thinking economists believe that the reasons the mainstream economists couldn't find abuse of market power in the cattle market was because they only focused on market outcomes while overlooking important elements of the competitive process in the beef packing industry. So what does that mean? Well, it means, for example, if the economists assume a competitive industry, but ignore the anti-competitive market power emanating from the concentrated beef packers, then their predictions will be wrong. So we urge more economists to begin challenging the false assumptions underpinning the recommendations made to Congress to essentially do absolutely nothing. The future of our cattle industry depends on it. So please go to www.labelourbeef.com, to learn more and to learn how you can help. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.